like to call to order the work session dealing with Anchorage Community Development Authority Resolution 2015-06. And I'd like to do roll call, and we'll start at this end.
Melinda Gann, Anchorage Community Development Authority.
Brian Regino, Parking Director, Anchorage Community Development Authority.
Robert Shake, Executive Director, Anchorage Community Development Authority.
Bill Evans.
Elby Gray Jackson.
Steele.
Amy DeBasti.
Patrick Flynn.
And I think this time around, Mr. Trainey's on the phone.
I'm here.
Okay, and there's not too many in the audience, and so I'd like for folks in the audience to identify themselves, please.
I'm Helia Palmer. I'm the Finance Director at Anchorage Community Development.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Deanna's Municipal Law, Department of Law. Debbie Golly, ADM.
John Rada, Parks and Recreation.
Ray Baker, Chief of Staff.
Thank you. Okay, do we have the floor? Did I miss somebody?
David Dunsmore, staff at Assembly.
Okay, thank you. And then Amanda. Yeah. Okay. Melinda, you have the floor.
Ready to go?
I think
Okay.
we're going to key it off with Bob Shea.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. First, I'd like to take a moment and extend my thanks to this body for your recent unanimous vote on my confirmation of the Executive Director position of ACDA. It's truly an honor to serve the community in which I was born, and I'm really excited about the pivotal role that ACDA has played and will play in the future. I find it exciting, and I wanted to take a moment and thank you very much for your faith in me.
You're welcome. And if I could take a moment for the record, Mayor Sullivan just joined the meeting. Thank you.
If I can actually follow up on that, if I may, Madam Chair.
Sorry?
May I follow up on that, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Welcome, Bob.
Nice to see you.
Good to have you aboard.
Thank you very much. We haven't seen each other in a long time.
It's been a while. Is your brother staying out of your business, or is he getting you?
He's driving me crazy. Thank you very much.
All right. We can take him off your hands. We might find a role for him somewhere.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Thank you. Today's presentation is being made by Brian Gorguno. Brian is our parking director at ACDA, been with the organization, and is a valued member of our executive management team. And I'm here to field questions, obviously, but with that said, and for sake of time, I turn it over to Brian. Brian?
I would like to echo the sentiment. Thank you for the opportunity to present some of this information to you. We don't have a ton of slides, and I believe everybody has handouts, and we're going to kind of go through this pretty quickly and then try to open it up for some additional questions. Some of it's information that you guys probably already have, but just to reiterate some of the highlight points from that. So first of all, ACDA's mission and vision, I think it's important to emphasize that because it's going to come into context as to why this resolution was approved by the board and why it's in front of you guys today. Our mission, of course, is to manage and enhance public parking and facilitate development for a vibrant community. Our vision is to use ACDA as a conduit for responsible development and convenient, safe parking services in the municipality of Anchorage, with an emphasis on ACDA acting as a catalyst for and investor in projects that help implement the economic and community development goals of the Anchorage community as expressed in our community plans and initiatives. These are ACDA's guiding principles. Some of the bullet points here that I think are of emphasis is that we will always seek opportunities on public or private development projects and ensure a component of public benefit. We will be fiscally sound, providing for long-term financial sustainability and return on investment. We will be proactive in seeking opportunities to align with the adopted plans and initiatives of the municipality. So when we look at any of our projects that come to our board or that get presented by staff and we're analyzing whether or not this fits our mission and vision, we usually take this infographic as an example to represent what this project is and how it falls into place. We always take a component of ACDA as its mission and vision and guiding principles. Does it align with what we want to do as a body? Does it align with the municipality of Anchorage? Is there a benefit there? And are we aligned with the community action plans that have been set forth by the municipality? As well as what is the community public component, either safety, parking, or to be a catalyst for development? When all three of these things align in our projects, we hit that center point, and that's really our goal, is to try to hit that center point every time. A couple of times, our projects might be very specific to a parking project, And we only really side on the ACDA and community as being the main benefactors, knowing that in the long run, the municipality benefits because we're developing better, safer parking practices in garages. So this is the ACDA balance sheet. This is audited financials. Our auditor is BDO. I believe it's the same auditor for the municipality. This is years ending 2013 and 2014. I want to spend a little bit of time on this one because I believe if we can help answer some questions that may have come in context to, are we able to support this new operating budget item expense? If you look at the top line item, cash and investments, from 2013 to 2014, we grew our cash flow by $1 million. Our current balance sheet year-end 2014 showed that we had $7.3 million estimated in cash reserves. Most of this we do have invested in the municipality's joint fund for investment, about $6 million of that, and the rest of it is operating cash flow. But that is cash.
If I may, for clarification?
Yes.
Okay. So 7.3 million in cash investments, and how much of that is in investments?
$6 million, but it is just as accessible as any other cash. I think there's a 2-day turnaround for us to draw on any of those funds when needed. They're not long-term
Can you tell us
investments.
a little bit about what type of investments they are? I mean, you don't have to get into too much detail, but I'd like...
Julia, our finance director, can give you more specifics on
Right.
that.
Would you please? Thank you.
$6 million is in the MOA cash pool, and they're invested in bonds. And the management company for the MOA bond portfolio is BlackRock. So there are no securities.
Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Okay. And so as we run down the balance sheets for both years, we can see growth in the organization from a cash perspective. We can also see that our total liabilities in that position has gone down slightly, mostly due to some of our capital project initiatives that we've taken on, or because of our depreciation expense. We have done a lot of improvements to the facades of the garages. We're doing construction improvements right now. Whenever we do these large capital investments, our depreciation will go up associated with those investments for the facilities. Is there any questions on these slides?
Doesn't look like it. Thank you.
So this is a snapshot. This is an unaudited financial statement of where we are today. Ending the month of May, we just finished closing this. As you can see, our cash position has grown again from year end. We're now at $7.5 million in cash.
So is it cash and investments?
Cash and investments,
Okay,
yes.
because it only says cash right there. And is it still $6 million invested in the MOA?
Correct. We increased it from $4 million to $6 million at the end of last year. So it was at 4 and then it moved up.
Thank you.
And then again, our total liability and equity, when we get to the bottom line, we're still a very strong position financially.
Certainly, Mr. Flynn.
Bottom right corner, loss for the period.
Correct. The majority of that has to do with the accounting practices of booking depreciation. As you can see, we show a loss on the books, and by the end of the year, it usually catches up to itself. And we'll show either a wash or we will show a positive gain when it comes to the final balance sheet. But the majority driver of that is we're cash flow positive, but our depreciation expense usually offsets more of the cash, so it's an accounting practice. And financially, Julia can elaborate a little bit more on how she books that depreciation.
You and I sat together in a many a board meeting,
Yes, we have.
and when this proposal came forward, I went back and looked through some of the old financial statements, and my recollection from that research was we had ended up with 2 cash positive years in the last 7.
Yes.
So most of the cash that we have is based on depreciation.
Most of the cash we have is from North Point Bluff lot sales. The majority of it we have had last few years. About 10 lots that we sell on an annual basis. And so that nets us about $900,000 to $1 million. So that's when we end the year with a really positive cash basis, which we have reinvested in
And to your point, Patrick, typically, without, and I'll get to the slide on North Point Bluff, which kind of tells the picture of how we've accumulated cash. Typically, the depreciation offsets our capital expenditure, so any cash positive flow would be in line with what you're indicating. And we would either show a small growth or we would show an offset.
You have now nailed my concern.
So,
Go ahead.
So we'll get to, you can go to the next slide. So this also highlights, why that is. Some of it has to do with our capital projects. This is our current capital plan for this year. A number of these projects are already in place or are going to be taking place, but the emphasis in capital projects for the next couple of years has been some structural improvements that we're making, and that's been 70% of our capital budget this year. It'll probably be close to that next year as well.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question?
Everything, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. And with that, your capital budget is fully funded. In other words, that $7.5 million cash is not needed for this capital budget. That's separate.
At this time, we anticipate no change or a very small change to the overall cash positive flow. Correct. It is fully funded at this point, 6 months down the road.
So if you don't mind, if I can tag on to the mayor's question. So what you're saying is there's 7.5 in cash investments, 3.55 in capital projects, and none of that 3.55 is coming from cash investments.
At this time, no. At this time, we're covering those expenses with our current budget and our current revenue streams from overall
So do you
operations.
anticipate some of it being used in the future?
It potentially could be. That's a good question. It really depends on how we decide to budget for these garage repairs. At this point, we're taking a 3-year approach so that we don't have to do that potentially. If we get more aggressive, this year was an aggressive year for us to address a lot of these concerns. If we got more aggressive next year than we were this year, then potentially yes. But there's no urgency there. It's more of a planning and managing the process and budget.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steele, Mr. Steele.
Yeah, that was kind of my question. I think you answered it, but so you're not considering a loss of revenue based upon the construction project. You're trying to schedule your project so that you will not have.
Currently, correct. So as of today, we're not anticipating a loss, and if revenues continue to come in as strong as we anticipate them, with some of the lot sales that we expect, we'll have another $1 million cash flow positive year that will wash some of this capital expense, so we won't grow like we have year over year by $1 million. We'll end up breaking even.
Do you have those sales under contract, or are those sales speculative at this point?
They're under contract. And the 2016 budgeting process is underway right now to determine if we are going to have a small loss, gain, or wash for 2016, and we'll be determining and presenting that budget, I believe, to the Assembly in October.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Evans?
And I may be confused about this, but at the board meeting I attended, there was talk, is it the 7th Avenue garage that's under study right now?
7th Avenue garage is under study, yes.
And what's this, can you just give us an update on what the status of that, or what is it we're studying?
What we're doing is some investigative repairs to determine the approach for repairing that facility, because it's an older construction. It has a different nuance to how they can fix it compared to the other facilities. We'll know at the end of the summer what repairs can be made and determine from there our approach to handling that facility.
Do we have an idea of the approximate range that those may take?
It could be in line with what our current estimates are if they can do it the same way, or it could be a complete rehab of the facility, and we'd have to analyze it and determine what our plan is going forward for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Bosky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I'm looking at your 2015 capital projects, when I see garage structural improvements, does that include the 7th Avenue garage in that?
It includes this capital project for this year is 5th Avenue Garage, 6th Avenue Garage, and 7th Avenue Garage. There's some repairs taking place and investigative repairs at 7th Avenue to determine how we can go about fixing it.
Okay, so let's separate the 7th Avenue garage right now, because I have talked to some of the board members, and the engineer's report is not supposed to be out till the fall. That's the report we're talking about, is that correct?
The report on how they can go about repairing it, we won't be determined until the end of this capital project, which is determined August 30th is when we're supposed to be wrapping this up.
Okay. So with the 7th Avenue garage, can you give me a numerical value of what the ranges could be? If it's on the facade or if it's a whole gut and repair?
If it's repairable the way we hope it to be, we could be looking at another $1 million. in that facility alone that we can determine how it phases into the rest of the work that we're doing for the next 3 years. If it's a complete replacement, the cost of construction, it could be $20 million. It's really a wide range. We don't know yet. We're hopeful, but until that's determined, we won't be able to strategize what it's going to take to determine what we do with that facility.
Sure, and we don't budget on hope. So when it comes down to it, with something with such a large price tag potentially facing this board, why are we not waiting to see what the status of that report is, to see what the repairs are before you spend $800,000 on a recreational facility?
The sentiment of the board was that they believe because we're not going to grow, there's still $7.5 million available for determining what we need to do with that facility.
You wanted to continue? Okay, Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I did have one more. Are you expecting income from the tennis facility? Are you expecting a return on that investment?
At this time, no.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Please continue.
So again, this is a kind of just a view of some of the restoration and some of the projects related to the capital line items. These pictures of before and after of the 7th Avenue garage entryways, which was one of the repairs we were able to take care of this year while the investigative repairs are going on. We've also done some elevator modernization projects, and we continue to expand our CCTV. So the development project, North Point Bluff, which gets back to Mr. Flynn's original comment on cash flow. This deal really has solidified us having the available funds to handle some of these capital projects and look at new development projects down the road. It originally had 64 total lots. To date, we've closed 47, and every one of the remainder 17 over the next 2 years are scheduled to close by contract. So we're expecting an estimated $2.4 million in cash flow to come from this deal before the end.
Mr. Evans?
Are there any other community development projects like North Point or others that are income generating or that create taxable property that
We have been approached by other developers to participate in building parking as a part of their mixed development projects, that we would retain the property and generate the revenue the way we would with any other parking garage. Those are on the table as a potential. Nothing's come to fruition where we actually are making an investment, but we've been solicited, at least provided some initial information.
Madam Chair, can I comment on that? One of the things Mr. Evans said we're hoping to do is, if we're successful in Congress acquiring the archive property, ACDA could potentially be an investor, just like in this project, and actually have a return, positive return.
And that's the conclusion of the slides. We can go back and if there's any questions on any particular ones. But I think the emphasis from ACDA is that the resolution in front of you was voted on by the board, supported by our board. We believe to have had the capital to make this investment, and that's kind of where we're at. And we welcome any questions.
Any questions from anybody? Mr. Trainee, do you have any questions? Mr. Trainee?
No questions, Ms. Gray Jackson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Are there any board members in the audience? No? Mr. Rada.
Mr. Rada,
Mr. Rada, would you like to make a comment? I'm welcoming you to. If not, that's okay also.
Well, we all participated in very active discussion. Presentations were made a couple times over. I think if there were any other particular comments, the board had a lengthy discussion, made their decision, and then passed it on, which Mr. Shake and Mr. Berguno presented today. I don't know if the mayor wants to make any additional comments.
Well, I'll ask them. But I have a comment before I hear from the mayor. And my comment is, when I'm looking at the financial statements on page 7, and I'm just going to read this, okay? The last paragraph, the unrestricted net portion of 12 million represents resources available to meet both ACDA's current and capital obligations. The main use of these assets, and I'll say it again, the main use of these assets is to provide the ACDA's share of the new parking facility project costs and for necessary improvements to the current capital assets. And I don't have any comments, I just wanted to read that. Mr. Mayor, you have comments?
No, and good comment. Obviously, that is the main mission, but when we created the Community Development Authority, I was on the Assembly at the time, and it was discussed that that role would be expanded to look at community projects that did not fit into the niche of parking or downtown parking structures. So that was when we, under the Begich administration, when this authority was created, they were given an awful lot of leeway under the guidance of the Board of Directors rather than the direct guidance of the Assembly, and looking at community projects was talked about and discussed, and one of the reasons that their role was expanded. So you're right, that's the main purpose, but it's not the only purpose. And one thing I want to point out is that there was discussion at the Assembly meeting during the public hearing about what would the role be of community, what would the role be of the school district. And Madam Clerk, if you can pass out for me, please. Ed Graff and I have completed a memorandum of agreement about the facility, who would be responsible for construction, operation, maintenance, et cetera, and Superintendent and I and Mike Adams are working over the last number of months to come to an agreement, and we signed it yesterday. So we're pleased that the school district is on board. They're very excited about the project. It adds tremendous capacity to their programs, whether it's assemblies, outdoor classrooms, robotics, competitions, in addition to, of course, the sports aspect. So, and I think, just to follow up on that, I think at the last meeting you all got copies of a letter from Jim Balamacy at Special Olympics. Special Olympics East High is the home for Special Olympics Winter and Summer Games. His letter of support expresses very, very strong interest in this project as well. So when we talk about a community project, this really does have many different aspects. Special Olympics will want to use it for opening ceremonies, for practices for things like field hockey, and they also have a special relationship with the United States Tennis Association for their athletes to develop quick start tennis, which for the Special Olympics athletes is a new addition to their repertoire of things they can offer that population. So very excited that Special O wants to be involved in this as well. So we were approached, just to continue, by Assemblymember Starr suggested to us at the end of the last Assembly meeting that maybe if there is concern about ACDA being a granting organization, because obviously if you give a grant, somebody has to be the first person to get a grant. There's never somebody who's not the first, but there was concern from folks that is that really the role to give grants? So Mr. Starr suggested that ACDA just manage the project. They're a development authority. They've got a development director. They've got the ability to contract. They've got the ability to bond. They can do many, many functions that a private public authority can do. And it actually made some sense because we don't want to get into a position, or certainly ACDA doesn't want to be in a position where one group is competing against another for a grant. And I think Mr. Shake and his group agreed that until they set up a more formal grant-type process, that it might be better just to manage the project. It's what a development authority does. And so at Mr. Starr's request, we developed an S version, and the S version essentially does just that. It puts the development in the hands of ACDA and solves that problem of being a grant to one organization versus another. So we've got copies of the S version for Assembly members as well.
So my question to you, Mr. Mayor, is if ACDA takes on the project, what's the operating maintenance cost going to be?
The operating maintenance cost? Well,
If they're going to take over this project,
well,
manage
they
it?
won't operate. If you read the memorandum of agreement with the school district and the city, yeah, no, and you got the weekend and everything, and any questions, early next week before the meeting. But essentially, the school district will be responsible for the opening and closing of the facility, securing the facility. Municipality under Parks and Rec will be responsible for emptying trash cans and doing those general maintenance things. But the maintenance is considered to be fairly minimal. Once you cover something, the elements don't destroy the courts, the nets, the other things that are inside the pavilion. So looking at maintenance being actually pretty darn minimal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other questions? No? Mr. Evans?
So it's for Mr. Shake. First of all, glad that you're on board. I was very encouraged to see that appointment. And this is just more of a general philosophical question. Since you're new to the helm of the organization, do you foresee ACDA being involved in projects of this nature in the future? Or is this sort of a unique kind of opportunity? And by projects of this nature, I'm talking about essentially public sector projects without a return on investment and without increasing the tax base.
Mr. Evans, I think from my perspective, I see ACDA being taking a leadership role in the public-private partnership, whether it be for housing, for multi-use, commercial, for for the various needs of the city. And I think each one will be evaluated on its own merit from a return on investment, and depending upon the participants. So I believe that the organization has a lot of opportunity to really move forward. My background, as you know now, is in financial services, banking, development particularly. I bring that experience to an already experienced team. So from this standpoint, what I've heard from the mayor say, concurrent to our board's approval, I think that I find that to be a good thing moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Steele?
Yeah, this then kind of falls in the realm of public service as an investment opportunity, it seems to me. And you just said that within 2 years you're going to have sold all those lots up on the hill. Do you have significant other property other than that, either in the inventory?
We have property inventory. Chime in if I miss one. We have a piece of property known as Frag Lot 3 that I've inspected. That's out in Glen Square, and the organization, as you're aware, bought some property on K Street in the Anchorage Original Town Site. They recently bought that. We have that in inventory. I'm not aware. I haven't seen any proposed plan yet, but we do have some inventory to move forward. The North Point project, if I could take a moment on Government Hill, for this organization coming in recently and looking at it and knowing that development very well, has been a tremendous success for the organization, as reflected in the results we've seen. So that part of it, I think, bodes well for the development aspect of what this organization was formed for. Ms. Gray Jackson, if I could please, to dovetail, albeit late on the mayor's comment, I do, May 7th, prior to my arrival, the ACDA Board of Directors did receive a letter from Special Olympics endorsing the project. If I could have the clerk distribute this. And if I could, please, in the crowd, with us today is Don Winchester. Don is a former board president and chair. If you, Mr. Winchester, if you'd like to.
All right, just a moment, Mr. Steele, do you have anything else?
That's fine.
Thank you.
It was just.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I speak to that?
Certainly.
Sure. My name is Don Winchester, and I have been involved with Special Olympics the last 20-plus years. And yeah, this would be a great asset to that facility for us. And full disclosure, I am part of the Alliance also. But we've had, over the years, for Special Olympics, we have had other than when East was under construction, our summer and winter games is at that venue. And to have this structure would be great for us because it's so close to actually to the track and that we'd be able to set up and run things, and it would help us economically, and that we don't have to bring tents and other things to that. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm very concerned about this 7th Avenue garage. So my question is, considering you have a potential liability out there, a very large one, if it comes back that it's going to be $15 million to fix the 7th Avenue garage, how are you going to pay for it? If it comes back at $10 million, how are you going to pay for it?
And Brian, you can chime in if I. It's my understanding that the authority has bonding capacity of approximately $4 million. That would be a portion of it. If you look at our financial statement with, our cash and investments, we would, if it was a worst case scenario, we would have to be creative, and we would have to do what it takes to get the structure to where it's, where it's suitable and meets our standards. We have found, I tend to be a glass is half full type of individual. What we found so far with our existing work has been very positive with our restoration. Our contractor that we brought in, our expert, we're blessed, they're doing a great job, but we're a can-do city. We'll do what it takes to make that work. But I understand the directness of your question.
Yeah, it just bothers me when we have $800,000 and we know we have potential liability and we say, well, we'll just go and tax for it instead. That bothers me. But going back to that, why the rush? If you could just wait and have some comfort when you know what you're dealing with at the end of the summer, as you indicated that report's coming, why the rush? Why not just wait until the report comes out so you know what your liability is, and then you could maybe give people like me who are concerned about potentially adding to our bond debt. Why rush?
This recommendation was endorsed by supermajority of our board. I represent the board. We're here to represent our board, and we have the support. They want to move the initiative. They want to move it forward.
So, Mr. Shea, I hate to do this to you, but I can't help myself sometimes, and this is one of those moments. To be very frank, multiple board members were changed out recently, and it is the feeling of those board members that were changed out, it was specifically because they wouldn't vote for this project. So when we talk about supermajorities at the board, I recognize how many members of the administration sit on that board, and I recognize how many were changed out. So I think in the effort of fairness and transparency, we need to acknowledge that, so other assembly members recognize that this was not a slam dunk, that everybody agreed upon it. And there were some members that weren't reappointed in their opinions, specifically because they didn't agree with this project. So, my concern is with this liability for the 7th Avenue garage. So there's got to be a plan, there's got to be something that you can bring to us on Tuesday, because for us to blindly say yes to something like this when it's never happened before, and granted, we're changing it now from a grant potentially to a development project. The fact is, ACDA has never given out $800,000 for a project like this. And it was given out with no competition, no other opportunities for other people to solicit for their projects. And that's concerning when we're talking about public funds. So, I really need to understand how you could potentially mitigate the 7th Avenue Theater. I mean, with or without this $800,000, if it comes in a very large amount, you may not be able to anyway. But what is the plan? Are you going to shut it down if it comes back bad enough? I mean, we need to understand what the liability is so we make an educated decision on Tuesday night. So I'm not asking for the information today because you're going to have to think about it and put your pencil down and say, okay, option A, if it's, $10 million, this is how we might be able to balance it. If, option B could be this, or option C. But those are the kinds of things that I need to know. And if they're not given to me, I won't be voting for this. But I need to know those things because we're talking about the public trust here. And it's not just about where we're spending the money, it's about the process. And so we need to know moving forward. When ACDA does something like this, I hate sole source contracts. People have heard me say it on the floor before. I don't care for them necessarily. Sometimes they're needed. Somebody only makes one type of equipment. I get that. But in this particular process, I don't understand why we're going full steam ahead when I don't think all our ducks are in a row yet. So I look forward to seeing a little bit more information on Tuesday. I do appreciate you bringing forward all the projects because that's what I asked for, and I appreciate that very much. It gives me a little bit more comfort. But I wasn't expecting to hear a number as big as I heard this morning when we were talking about, or this afternoon when we were talking about potential liabilities against that garage. So hopefully you guys will have a big hopefully it'll come in much easier. It'll just be superficial, and this will be a move.
Can I clarify the capital project aspect of it just a little bit? One that's based on the cost of construction per space, we would be faced with that same challenge, whether we were building a new facility or repairing an existing one. And as a development authority for parking garages, we may have some of those same challenges despite what happens with the 7th Avenue garage. These repairs also can be done over time to extend the life of the facility. For example, the ones we're doing now, over the next couple of years could extend the life of the facility for 20 years. So even if it does have a replacement to be determined, it could be 10 years down the road before we actually have to address it as an urgent issue. There's a lot of things that we can do by being as proactive as we've been to mitigate some of those costs down the road by taking care of the repairs we're taking care of today.
Effectively, you'll know that when you get the engineer's report at the end of the summer.
We'll know even more information to be even more proactive and be able to plan out ahead of time.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Mr. Buckley. Mr. Evans?
I have two questions, and then one I think might be for the mayor. I just wanted to make sure where we were with respect to, are we is the issue on Tuesday going to be the grant, or is it going to be an ACDA kind of run thing? Or is, I know that I don't know if that was just a concept, or we're actually talking about changing that.
Well, there is the S version that was handed out at the request of Mr. Starr. It's his intention, as I understand it, to move the S version, to remove that one point of controversy that Ms. Dombrowski mentioned. It's non-competitive, and people are feeling, gosh, where's my grant? But again, two things. Number one, I think his solution solves that problem. But again, people do have to remember the authority was set up to be governed by a board of directors, and their process is what it is. They notice their meetings, they notice their agendas.
And that actually gets to my question: is if the S version changes this to a ACDA project, is the board required to pass another resolution on it?
That's a good question. Mr. Shake, I think you talked to numerous board members.
To answer your question, we're prepared to, pending now the vote goes to call a special meeting of our board to present the change for their review and approval.
Might be a cart and a horse situation there, but I don't know if the assembly would approve it if the board hasn't yet said they.
All you're doing is giving them the capacity. They don't have to spend it. So if the board decides to go a different direction, all you've done is just give them the opportunity.
And the second question, if I may, just the last exchange you brought up. You mentioned, Brian, that there were some other projects that you at least had inquiries about. Does this, if this goes forward, does the amount expended on this in any way impact the ability of ACDA to enter into the
The belief of the board is no. Based on the current cash flow from specifically the North Point Bluff project, is that we're not going to reduce our current cash status, so we'd be in the same boat at the end of this year as we are today.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. And I have a comment to make, because we have some new rules on the book that is an ordinance, and this S version is substantially different than the original document that's been advertised to the public. So with that said, Mr. Mayor, I believe, based on the new rules, that besides the fact that the board may have to vote again, the Assembly is probably going to have to re-advertise this, which means that we're not going to even be able to deal with this until the meeting of July 14th anyway. So I just wanted to make that point based on the ordinance through the public process. Any other comments before we adjourn the meeting? No?
Madam Chair.
Mrs.
I was just
Dombrowski?
going to say, the new ordinance, I believe, that we passed also says if there's substantial changes, there's supposed to be an AM that accompanies it, explains what the difference is.
Exactly. Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Well, if there are no other comments, meeting's adjourned.